In the course of evolution, in which life on Earth passed through stages of single-celled organisms to eukaryotes to multi-celled and complex organisms, one ever-present force has guided all of it to where we are now. Integration, that underlying principle that is seen in all arenas of intelligent life. Individual organisms utilize anything in their environment to ensure life and postpone death. By far the most advantageous way for this to happen is for peaceful and intelligent coexistence to take place. The flora feeds the fauna, which in turn digests and returns the food back to the flora. The flowers attract the bees, which in turn spreads the seeds and plants more flowers. The weather patterns, seasonal cycles, birds, bees, plants, and trees all live within a greater organism that many now call Gaia, the living earth. And upon this earth, there is no such thing as waste. Each part feeds the next and eventually cycles back into itself. All these intelligent moving parts fit together in an integrated system. The purpose of integration is for many individuals to work towards one higher cause that no one individual could achieve alone. In the world of computers, software and hardware are upgraded perpetually for one purpose: to better integrate the rest of the endless web of technology. These upgrades not only add new features to the system, but they remove disruptive or obsolete features as well. In the world of psychedelic plants, we find that their effect on human consciousness not only adds insights and visions, but dismantles unproductive or harmful patterns. But when a deep psychedelic experience has completed, oftentimes the seeker is left with more questions than answers. It is precisely these moments that call upon us to take time, in peace, silence, and reflective contemplation, in order to pick up the shattered pieces of who we believe we were, discard what no longer serves us, and hold on to that which may still teach us, and to reintegrate back into the dynamic system from which we were momentarily departed.
Probably just as important as the psychedelic experience is the process of integration. When you have a psychedelic experience, all your preconceived notions of the world melt down, gone. You can develop all this new information, floods of new information, and with all this new information, you have to integrate it into your life when you come back.
The physical body has been taxed. The brain, in some ways, has been taxed. Our psychology has been taxed in that we have to reevaluate some pretty fundamental assumptions about ourselves. And energetically, our spiritual body has been blasted open and is reforming. And that's what's happening energetically with psychedelics. And like anything, it takes time for that to happen. It's a process. It doesn't happen over a few hours or even a few days. And that sometimes it can take many, many weeks or months to return to like a different baseline, right? A baseline that's more holistic, maybe.
Overwhelming experiences often call us to take breaks in order to process what just happened. After the death of a loved one, there's a grieving period. After running a marathon, a recovery phase. And after the fabric of reality is unwoven and stitched back together, after people's old habits are dismantled, there is also a period in which the tissues of the body and the patterns of the mind need to begin anew. In the daily grind of economically driven society and survivalism all around, the moments we give ourselves to reflect upon our lifestyles and choices are few and far between. And this happens even after psychedelic journeys that beg for us to slow down and integrate the messages they hold.
I think it's a mistake when people rush off to their job or rush off to do something, that reestablishes all the old patterns, because there's this amazing opportunity that people have when, after the psychedelic experience ends, when things are fresh, when their brain is sort of almost like a newborn baby, and they have this ability to establish new patterns. You want to strengthen those new patterns in this process of integration instead of going back to the old patterns.
A lot of people I hear from say that they believe ayahuasca to be very damaging because people who come back to society find it very, very difficult to cope after they come back to society. Gee, I knew this guy and he wasn't the same after he came back. It can be that way for people because we live in a very, very dysfunctional society. That's why it's so important for people to integrate their experience after ceremony. You've got to sit down with the people you had the ceremony with and talk about it and realise what you've experienced and realise what the world is that you've now opened up and realise what you're going to be coming back into. See, that's the problem with ayahuasca, is that it does reconnect people to the earth so much that when they come back to somewhere like New York, they just go, oh my God, what am I swimming in? I can't do this anymore.
Many of those who have traveled to the Amazon jungle to try ayahuasca in its traditional surroundings experience culture shock. The language, the environment, the customs, and of course the medicine become a whirlwind of new experience that can be stressful on the body and mind. This is what is called a peak experience, and now these experiences are so easily attainable that people with no preparation and no context for the life-altering journey to come are flooding the Amazon in search of this brew. In the 1960s, the youth were increasingly experimenting with psychedelics and ripping apart their most cherished belief systems, but with little education and a lot of ambition. So even if they were waking the sleeping mind to new information, were they truly ready? Just as the gut is equipped to break down complex food into basic building blocks for energy, the nervous system must switch from sympathetic or activity-based to parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest state. Without this switch, without the resting state, the food struggles to digest. So what is the result of moving from one peak psychedelic experience to the next without fully digesting the previous insights that were gained? What happens when people do ceremony after ceremony without time for integration?
If you take another medicine before that integration is done, you start to stack those big realizations and big understandings without fully integrating them. And in a sense, it can create its own psychic burden. And it shows up like anxiety. It's like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed by the concepts that I've received from my medicine work experiences. So there are times when doing regular work repeatedly is healthy and important, particularly in healing a trauma or something like that. You're doing some real clinical work, and it's a period. But then after that, there should be long, extended periods of non-medicine use just to really fully receive and embody the lessons of the medicine.
In most ayahuasca circles, after each night of ceremony, the group will sit together and share their experiences or insights in order to allow the group to reflect upon what they experienced and why. Some speak about what they saw or felt. Others realize that they need to be better to the people around them or spend more time laughing and enjoying life. And others find themselves still in the throes of the journey. Many of them have similar reasons for attending the ceremony in the first place, and it's nearly always because the life that they were leading seemed off track, and now they're desperately looking for the trail of breadcrumbs to lead them back to the familiar world.
Many people say, I am here because I lost myself. It's interesting to hear, because hey, I'm here, how can I lose myself? So what they are reporting is that their spiritual awareness knows that they're not complete. Somewhere on their highway of life, they took the wrong exit. And then nasty things have happened, experiences happened, and they want to go back on the highway. So the beauty is, when you hear 40 people share, you lose your modesty or shyness or even shame, and you just share. And so I share, and I hear myself say something that I did not prepare. I was going to say something different, but because of the whole group and the sphere, the atmosphere, the vibration, the resonance, because it's a dynamic field that we're all in, I hear myself say a different thing. And I think, where does that come from? It's, of course, my own subconscious speaking.
The ability for these medicines to reveal our subconscious mind to us might be the hallmark of how psychedelic plants can offer us life-changing moments. And out of all the plant medicines, ayahuasca ceremonies in modern contexts are held in a slightly different manner from other ceremonies. There's usually an emphasis on the sharing circle. Whether or not everyone speaks is second to the priority of all being present for the sharing. These moments highlight the need for such peak experiences to be spoken about, listened to, and respected. This allows for the nervous system to settle, for the mind to evaluate the experiences, and to integrate the lessons of the medicine into the tissues of the body. There are very real shifts taking place internally and even externally around those who partake in the ceremony. To illustrate the effects of what psychedelic plants are truly doing to the human body and the energy field, a professor at St. Petersburg University, Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, has developed a technology to measure the biofield of the human body during ayahuasca ceremonies.
My main background is quantum physics and biophysics. And at some time I developed instruments. Their overall name is gas discharge visualization. And this instrument allows us to detect, measure, and analyze human energy field. And we work in predictive integrative medicine. It is measuring so-named stimulated electrophoton emission. We apply very short electrical impulses to our fingers, and we have response in the form of photons and electrons from the skin. So we are measuring people before, during, after ceremonies, and this allows to understand how people transform, how they experience this. And typically, of course, it takes ayahuasca. It is very energy-consuming process. It opens up human chakras. It opens up your energy field. That is why people become vulnerable. And of course, they lose energy in the process of ayahuasca. That's why later on they need to be closed, energy fields should be closed, and they need to be recharged. And we see this in our measurement.
We can see that initial energy field was quite strong, 80 joules, and it's uniform, very good. And after ayahuasca it is 61 joules, so it dropped down, it shrinked, as we discussed, and we need to take it down, so it is practically 1 day after. Same as on level of stress dropped down, you see, from 307 to 291, so it's very positive effect, but energy dropped down as well, quite strongly. And we see dramatic effect on chakras as well, so it was, chakras was very disoriented, and after ayahuasca ceremony they became very well aligned. Not ideal, of course, because it's not meditation process, it's different process, but they are much more aligned than before.
Dr. Korotkov mentions that meditation puts the body and mind into a different process than an ayahuasca ceremony. The greatest difference is that the meditative insights are arrived at by an inner process of relaxing, breathing, focusing, and observing. By its very nature, meditation is the process of integration. This is why every spiritual tradition uses meditation to integrate our concepts of life with real life at the end of each day. Even in the Amazonian ayahuasca ceremonies, after each icaro or song, a moment of silence is observed. In order to close the photon field around the body before the ceremony, the shaman blows mapacho smoke over the crown of the head. And several traditions also include a flower-infused bath after ceremony, specifically to close any rip or hole in that field after it is weakened by the medicine. This phenomena is also seen after receiving news. If the news is not shocking or destructive to the current mind frame, not much energy is required to digest the new information. But if the news is intense and the person is not prepared, it can cause such an awakening, such a transformation, that the energy field around the body is diminished as it moves inward to digest the earth-shaking information. So what if a psychedelic journey reveals the inadequacies and shadow sides of the modern society we identify ourselves with?
Enlightenment is a very destructive process. Enlightenment is a breaking down of everything you thought was real. And none of this society is real. You know, becoming aware of that is key. That's the only way we're going to heal it. But that's why I say to people, I suggest they do not undertake this path lightly. You know, the path to enlightenment and the path to spiritual awakening is very, very uncomfortable. You're not going to go there and drink and suddenly become this new age guru who's shining light and is going to go out and be warm and fuzzy and speak the truth everywhere. You're going to wake up and look back at the world and go, oh my God, what have I been doing for the last 30 or 40 years, and what am I doing, and what is this world I'm living in? And it can be very, very confrontational. So if you're not ready for that, maybe don't do the medicine.
And so psychedelics can often bring up a variety of different kinds of material that's very difficult for people to accept and to figure out how to move forward with. But that's also the gift of the psychedelics, is that they force us to deal with these issues that we were otherwise able to bury into our unconscious. So people often have difficult experiences because they don't have the support necessary to help them move through the new information and to find a different level of integration regarding the traumatic experiences that they had in the past.
If it truly is a lack of support that keeps us from integrating new and useful information, what kind of support are we in need of? By looking to the experts who have been researching psychedelics in both modern and ancestral contexts, we can begin to acknowledge how shamanic cultures use psychedelic plants to strengthen and expand the community and even raise their youth.
The major problem is, how to integrate this into a larger culture. If you were a Huichol living in Mexico or, in one of these cultures where everybody is part of rites of passage and so on, has these experiences, then it's actually helping the culture, because the way of living, the life strategy, the philosophy, the mythology, the spirituality of the culture comes out of these experiences. So they actually initiate the young people into their way of living and their way of thinking. This is very different. We see what happened in the 60s. Suddenly you had a young generation that started creating a totally different hierarchy of values, Make love, not war, very pacifistic feeling, very much concerned about the environment and so on. They started differentiate themselves in the way they looked, beards and long hair and beads and funny uniforms. They're painting their cars with psychedelic colors, so every cop knows there's grass to be found there. Not very skillful revolution.
A rite of passage is something that many traditional cultures do value, where young people maybe go through some rite. It could be something like your first hunt, or it might be something like getting your first tattoo. It might also be your first ayahuasca ceremony or your first peyote ceremony. Of course, in our modern culture, we have ceremonies which all too few people have nowadays, like a confirmation, a bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah. But I think that we need some sort of rite of passage, because young people, they want to show that they're more grown up. I don't know how it is in various cultures, but I do know that young people are going to come up with some pretty, sometimes dangerous rites of passage, and very often it also entails not being truthful with their parents. And wouldn't you want your teenagers to tell you they were thinking about doing something of this nature, they were thinking about doing psilocybin, and that they could talk to you about it, that you knew where they were, who they were with, and maybe you could even give them some guidance, like you should have an intention, a prayer, be in a safe set and setting.
Current forms of rites of passage are seen at age 16 when children in the U.S. can legally drive, at age 18 when they can vote, and 21 when they can legally drink. But these achievements are not earned by bravery, intelligence, or honor, but simply by being alive through enough solar cycles to be considered an adult. Because it is only natural that youth crave to perform more mature tasks in order to prove themselves, ancestral tribes have traditionally crafted cultural passageways for children to become adults. In the small island nation of Vanuatu, boys at the age of 7 or 8 begin bungee jumping, oftentimes off a 98-foot tall tower, with a vine tied to their ankles, to symbolize their bravery and their ascent into adulthood. Among the Apache of North America, the young girls must complete the sunrise ceremony after their first menstruation, in which they paint themselves and reenact the Apache origin myth of the first woman. For 4 days, they are not to touch their skin and can only drink water. The Inuit youth are brought into the harsh Arctic weather to learn to speak with animals and hunt. At age 13, the boys of the Satare Mawe tribe in the Brazilian jungle wear gloves filled with bullet ants, which cause extreme throbbing pain. All of these rites of passage call upon the youth to engage with their community and perform some sacrificial ritual in order to become an adult in that particular tribe. But these communities weren't simply initiating people into adulthood. They were integrating them into a healing tradition in order to serve others and the planet at large. For the hallmark of a functional society is peaceful and intelligent community goals.
One of the classic features of shamanism was that the neophyte who was trying to develop shamanic skills would have to go through a very arduous ritual, ordeal, often spending weeks or more alone in the wilderness, and often with the expectation that they were going to have to encounter and deal with the animals, the beasts that came to kill them. And I think that this reflects a primordial human concern. Once we become conscious, we realize we're going to die. Your dog doesn't know he's going to die. The antelope out on the plains doesn't worry about whether or not the tiger or lion is going to eat him unless it's right there. But we have a consciousness to project into the future and say, eventually it's my turn. So how do we deal with this angst, this anxiety about death? Well, shamanic practices had a variety of different ways of addressing this death concern. And one was that you acquired an understanding of your spiritual nature, that the body dies, but the spirit doesn't. And so people sort of move beyond the concern about their physical demise to understanding this continuity of spiritual existence.
The realization that someone comes to, that one day they will die, doesn't sink in all at once. It takes many moments of considering the implications of this final event to truly make an impact on that person's daily life. Some people perhaps never come to this realization. So to fully integrate the knowledge that one day this body will die and return to the earth, tribes have traditionally used extreme rites of passage as well as psychedelic plant ceremonies. Without dedicated moments of focusing on mortality, we may never fully realize the importance of living life as if we truly know it will one day end. Those who have gone through near-death experiences have reported much of the same phenomena as psychedelic journeys. Portals of light, otherworldly beings and ancestors, timelessness, and even the total life reviews that cause them to reevaluate what matters to them. They often report that they felt every harsh word or action that they've ever given, but from the other person's perspective. Another commonality between near-death experiences and deep psychedelic ceremonies is the realization of how we truly use the precious time that we're given in this body, and that this fleeting moment of life between birth and death should be devoted to the people around us. In fact, all of life seeks to integrate and support each other as one living organism.
You couldn't develop consciousness in a vacuum. It kind of takes an interaction of things. And all of life is really an interaction of things, you know. The body you see before you, they say every 7 years I've completely gone through all my cellular matter, you know. And I've reproduced new cells, my old cells have died off, hair has fallen off, skin's fallen off, and I'm completely rebuilt. Same thing with consciousness. I was on my 30th birthday and I was kind of depressed. My first book hadn't been published yet and I was feeling like kind of a failure. And I did some mushrooms and I was just like, you know, I started out with a friend, but I was being such a bummer. I think he just went home. And I was lying in this bathtub, having a bath, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And there was this spider plant hanging above the bathtub. And it was just dry as dry. And I could see its roots and tentacles vibrating, sensing the wealth of water that I was in, just going like this. And I cut my hand and I put the water up to its roots and it just went limp and just started sucking the water right out of my hands, you know. And it just totally kind of brought the whole thing to life for me, you know, in a fascinating way that I don't think I would have ever noticed had it not been for the effects of the mushrooms. And yeah, I think that it makes us realize that we are on Mother Earth. You know, that's what these plants offer.
That's the message. We have to re-understand that we are part of nature. We're not in control of it. And we are potentially capable of damaging it very severely by upsetting and sort of destabilizing all of these homeostatic processes that keep Gaia, the Gaia organism in equilibrium. We need to wake up. I think the plant teachers have been urging us to wake up as long as we've been associated with them. But we're not very, we don't listen very well, and it's getting even more urgent. First you have to wake up, then you have to wise up. You have to have the realization, then what do you do about it? That is trickier. But I think it's inevitable.
According to many conversations surrounding this topic, the most important thing we can wake up to is the nature of our individual egos, the collection of beliefs and behavioral patterns we have about ourselves. The ego often wants to know all and control all in order to ensure no one else can take what is ours. But this violent cycle of fighting for our place at the expense of others is fantasy, not reality. The web of life is already functional without our desire to exploit it and milk it for everything we can. This is called scarcity mentality, the belief that there isn't enough for everyone, so I better get mine. Unfortunately, when someone is in this mode, it is difficult to wake up to its inadequacy, especially when surrounded by others that are also stuck in scarcity mentality. So the process of waking up is a surrender and a letting go of our ambition to have more than others and more than we need. From there, the wising up process consists only of peacefully and intelligently integrating with the one dynamic web of life that we are all dancing upon, a surrender to the flowing river of life. And the punchline at the end of this divine comedy is that one way or another, through intention or exhaustion, the river will win. But why then does the ego seem so afraid of surrendering to the ways of the universe?
The ego wants closure, it wants a complete explanation. The beginning of wisdom, I believe, is the ability to accept an inherent messiness in your explanation of what's going on. Because nowhere is it writ that human minds should be able to give a full accounting of creation in all dimensions and on all levels. The universe at this moment is a tremendously complicated, integrated, multi-level thing. Perhaps what the universe is a kind of system in which more advanced forms of order actually influence previous states of organization. They are attractors. That means that they exert influence on less organized states and pull them toward some kind of end state. The attractor is at the bottom of a very deep pit into which all phenomena is cascading.
All life is truly a lesson, and the attractor that Terence speaks of is that invisible compelling force that calls us to continue learning in life. The increasing complexity of the universe may be exactly what calls us to abandon the ambition of knowing everything or playing every role, and to simply play our own role, to keep observing and engaging reality in order to use the information that we do have more wisely. Perhaps the evolution of complexity in the universe is a reflection of our capacity to understand and utilize more complex information. And one of the most complex and malleable instruments we use is the mysterious and ever-evolving human brain.
The brain is a product of evolution, and the brain evolved as a kind of profound information generator. It generates an inordinate amount of complex information, but also to receive and process information. And the environment is also an information generator. The environment is full The external world is full of information, and this information is always entering the brain. But the brain needs to learn to sample information that is useful and to learn from that. And in a sense, sensory information sculpts the brain. It sculpts the connectivity, the patterns of connectivity. All of these neurons, these cells in the brain, they are connected in an extremely complex, intricate pattern. As sensory information enters the brain, it changes the structure.
Perhaps the universe itself is one single phenomena overflowing with information, and our brains are the part of that phenomena that collects, processes, and generates new combinations and patterns in service to an ever-evolving relationship between creation itself and that which is continually creating it. If psychedelic plants truly break down old beliefs and thought patterns to make way for the new, the way a wildfire clears the debris from a forest so new life can grow, then maybe the process of integrating into the cosmos is not a dilemma to be solved, but a dance to be danced. The idea of solving problems only allows for win, lose, or draw scenarios. If life were viewed more as a relationship of moving parts, a cosmic dance to engage with, learn from, and perpetually refine, then the outcome wouldn't be limited by who gets what in the end, but by how deeply we connected. Perhaps the point of living is not a measure of the individual puzzle pieces, but how they integrate into the full picture of life itself. Up next, we will open two sides of the holy mushroom theory, a debate that might shake the foundation of the Christian religion and its origins.